Porn is a supernormal stimulus. It gives your brain very high levels of dopamine. Andrew Huberman was just on Theo Vaughn's podcast recently talking about how it's a 400% jump from baseline dopamine. Cocaine's a 450%. Part of the problem is, you're young and something difficult happens and you learn that masturbation feels good. It helps you escape. It takes the edge off. It takes you out of your current present situation. It becomes your mood regulation tool. Over time, it becomes the tool. But then now you enter into high-speed internet porn with such high levels of dopamine, it just hijacks the brain. So the beautiful thing is, when you start upward spiraling your brain, all of those things begin to come online. Clarity, you think more clearer, you sleep better, physical health, go to the gym, you get outside in nature, you call friends, you laugh, you do your hobbies. People stop creating, they stop having fun because there couldn't be enough dopamine there. When you step away from dopamine dependency, all those things come online.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
What if I told you that nearly 17 million American men start their day by watching porn? Not coffee, not the news, not hitting the gym, instead, porn. And the numbers don't lie, and neither do the consequences. Broken relationships, career sabotage, and brains that are basically being held hostage. So we brought in a brain wizard, Dr. Trish Leigh, world-renowned neuroscientist, and a woman who has already helped thousands of men rewire their brains and reclaim their lives. She says, control your brain or it will control you. Today, we're finding out exactly how to flip that switch. Dr. Trish,
Yes.
Dr. Leigh, Dr. Trish
Hey,
Leigh,
yeah.
welcome to the
Yeah,
show. Thank you
exactly.
for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yeah,
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 thank you for having me. I am very
absolutely.
glad to be here.
Good. Awesome. We're excited to have you. Just a quick announcement. We have space available in our Spartan race on October 19th. Dr. Trish, you're welcome to join our Spartan race. It's
Ah,
only going to
sweet.
be it's going to be a,
Cool.
a 5K obstacle course outside of Dallas, Texas. Head to mentalkingmindfulness.com to learn more about that and sign up. And we also have a weekly email list too that anyone can join just by going to our website, mentalkingmindfulness.com. And we're just going to do our one breath grounding practice. Uh,
Mm.
so let's everybody, eyes closed or open. You can do this while you're driving or walking in the grocery store, but we start with a nice little exhale all the way out your mouth. Really get empty. Feel that bottom on that emptiness on that exhale. Take a big giant breath in. Fill deeply big all the way up into the head. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Exhale out your mouth. Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And slowly come back when you're ready. And hey, thank you
Oh,
everyone for being
so
here, for
good. I wish we
tuning
could do
in. I know, for
that.
sharing this podcast. I know, right? Let's just meditate this whole episode. You
Exactly.
know what I mean? Like
Can we
teach
just
people
do
how to
this for the
regulate.
next hour?
Because we're gonna get in
It
some pretty
is.
juicy stuff here.
Yes, we are.
So let's just jump in and I thought a great way to start was like to understand, what actually pornography addiction is.
Yeah, and I have to go back to the intro that you said because that is so perfect, and I was thinking I haven't spoken about, morning porn habits in a long time, and I promise to use it to answer the question of what's happening in the brain. But, a lot of men do start their day with porn. And I know that at a certain point, they begin to question it. Why do I have to consume porn in the morning? And long story short, is your brain has become accustomed to needing a dopamine boost to get you through your day. That is the long story short. So we know that the brain mechanisms that fly under the radar when it comes to porn use, it's basically a dopamine dependency. And porn is a supernormal stimulus. It gives your brain very high levels of dopamine. Andrew Huberman was just on Theo Vaughn's podcast recently talking about how it's a 400% jump from baseline dopamine. Cocaine's a 450%. So
Wow.
you need a boost. Dopamine is the motivation molecule. It motivates you
Mm,
back to the place where you got it from. It feels like pleasure, but it's a driving force in your life. So
mm.
that's what we're talking about here. It's the chase for dopamine, but unfortunately, it's insatiable and you will never find what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, the dopamine itself. I mean, it's they call it like we actually had, you might have read this book, The Molecule of More.
Mhm,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, so we had, Michael E. Long on the
Uh,
show, like, God, it goes back a couple years, I think, but, he was like, "That's the driver, dopamine," and it's actually I mean, it is built into our biology in order to help us to survive, essentially, right? And now here it is, it's like, being manipulated with pornography, with gambling, and so many different, like, technology, um
it's the distortion that's the problem. Like, I'm sure you've heard, money isn't the root of all evil. It's the constant drive for more and more money that, can hijack a person. It's the same thing with dopamine. Evolutionarily, dopamine's really important to keep us alive, to keep us in tribes, to keep us thriving. And it's supposed to be linked to our purpose and our livelihood and our life and our relationships and our hobbies, all those things that not only serve us, but also serve humanity. And when it comes to porn and supernormal stimuli, especially those that are digitally driven, which is the largest concern in today's day and age, it gets hijacked and it'll pull a person back into the screen away from their life.
Wow, and so it's the dopamine that obviously we keep drives us back to more porn, more clicks, watch another channel, like, and
Yeah, and it's
scrolling for more. Yeah.
it's more complicated than that, of course. So, from my standpoint, I use something called EEG, electroencephalogram, so I can see how people's brain perform. And there's underlying patterns that will become also drivers. They're linked to the dopamine and the need for the dopamine, but basically it's stress activation in the brain, a wired and tired brain. So every time you go back to porn, it's actually stressing the brain out. Of course, it feels good then because of the dopamine, but it's putting strain on the system. I call it strained brain just to make it easy to conceptualize. You have a wired and a tired pattern. You're stressed out, anxious, overstimulated, plus fatigued. And that is an underlying driver too, back to the dopamine. So it's caused by the porn cycle, perpetuated by it, and then relieved by it. Talk about your downward spiral.
Wow. So it almost like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's we get that hit, we feel good for a moment, and then we have this massive dump. And I think I actually have a quote here, by Huberman, who you're talking about. The faster the rise in dopamine, the steeper the crash, and the greater the chance of lowering your baseline dopamine level overall or over time. So, and that's that hijacking.
It is. And then the lowering in baseline overall is something I call drained brain because basically your arousal becomes your baseline arousal becomes lowered. This is where people will feel depression or general malaise or lack of motivation. Your get up and go, got up and went. And it's because that baseline is lowered. And now you need an extra big hit just to feel okay, to not feel bad, not even to feel good anymore. It's to not feel bad. And that's where the dependency piece comes in, and I see it in people's brains all the time on their QEEG brain maps. Drain brain, it leads to what I call SAD, sexual arousal dysfunction, namely ED, which there's a huge rise, scientific studies show. ED in young men through the roof.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that a little bit later. I just want to like cover some like bases here as far as like so,
Sure, of
but
course,
like so
of course.
the dopamine part is obviously a big driver to the addiction of porn. But why is porn itself like so highly addictive?
It is a supernormal stimulus. So, I mean, well, let's just go back to sex cells, right? It always has. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
sex cells, and from an evolutionary perspective, um, speaking of the distortion, I like to use the word distortion because it's a really good word because there's these natural biological processes that are supposed to not only, lock in survival, but allow humanity or an individual to thrive. And the mechanism of sex is a very important one. Not only it's keeping our planet alive with people. So the idea is the dopamine's supposed to be linked to partnered sex. And even in evolution, men are attracted to younger, fertile women. So that is for procreation. That's the natural design. So when now we have porn with, the easy button, the click of one button, you can have a bevy of anything that you want to be able to consume, it's hijacking that natural evolutionary drive for procreation and distorting it. And your brain is thinking, "Oh yeah, this is what I need to to survive." But it's not. It's been distorted and hijacked, and that's the supernormal stimulus. That is why high-speed internet pornography is so dangerous compared to, old school classical porn of Playboy magazines that were hidden in the mattress, because now we have pixels over people because of all the dopamine.
Yeah, wow, and it's probably only gonna get worse with AI, and I remember even those back in the day, like, just the magazines and, I would I remember my first pornography consumption on VHS. It
Mhm,
was, like, after
mhm,
school, and my buddy my buddy Fred, like, my god, I was not even there was, like and, his mom was not coming home till 5, and we throw in some old tape, you know what I mean? We're just like,
uh-huh.
"Oh my god," like 14, 15, you know? It was I
Uh,
mean, it was wild, but now it's just like, I mean, it's everyone has a phone,
oh, yeah, porn
everyone
in
has
porn in your
multiple
pocket.
devices. Yeah, porn in
Yep,
your pocket all the
average age
time.
of exposure is down to 8 years old. And
Yeah.
it was 10
Oh
for a
my
long
god.
time, so just think of that, and then, it does hijack the brain, and almost immediately it changes the baseline of dopamine to need more dopamine, within the second exposure. And I absolutely think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. I think AI is one component, but social media and OnlyFans, I think, is actually a larger concern because who knows, like, when AI will hit mass market that it's affecting the masses or the vast majority of people, where the interactional style on social media totally hypersexualized, consumer and consumed, people posting hypersexualized content, mostly young women, to get the likes, external validation, men kind of manipulating women using the likes. We know there's a significant increase in narcissism, even in teenagers, self objectification in young women. Young women are following influencers who become OnlyFans performers because the money's there, and we know that I believe, and we know scientifically, there's an identity crisis that's upon us that we haven't even seen the ramifications because people no longer know who they are. They just
Yeah.
know where they're
Right.
getting the likes and what they're going to follow because they're getting the dopamine from that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so much of our society is, more and more people are searching for the external validation. Whereas, like, what we do with like mental and mindfulness and meditation, all these practices, you go within, you discover who you are within, and, and then all of a sudden, and then you can be whoever you want, but it's like, especially at such a young age, which is so disturbing to hear people at eight. I mean, who knows when people just get a phone and social media and have the ability to connect with like millions of people like instantly, and you have such a young brain. I mean, what the brain of an adult isn't fully formed until like 26 is when your executive function, right, is fully
Yeah,
intact or
28 for
something like
men, 26
tw-
for
yeah.
women. And that's why I always joke with parents that you are your child's frontal lobe until the age of 28.
Wow, yeah,
Right?
exactly. And we
You
take a lot
have
of
to be.
yeah, we take a lot of cues from our parents if they're around. And that's probably part of the problem here. Like there's not a lot of parenting going around. And sometimes like because of how hard we're working all the time, and we need to work because just like things just continually get more expensive, you have like no like there's like the home life is shattered for a lot of these kids,
It
and where do
is.
they
Yeah,
go or
and we
like
have
uh,
digitally distracted parents, that's what they call them in the
right.
scientific literature. So,
Yeah.
you have a parent who worked all day and they're vegging out on the couch on their phone when,
Mm,
there's kids that need to be parented so they don't veg out on their phone. And by the way,
yeah.
I'm the mother of 5 children, so this comes with 0 judgment because I've been parenting for over 2 decades now, so
Yeah.
it necessitates intention, especially in today's day and age.
Right. Yeah. It's wow. Good on you. 5 kids. I mean, and God.
Well, I
Um.
also know how to navigate, growing up young adults with their devices because I know from having so many kids that it's not a one and done. Like, I can't say, do this with your kid because all 5 of my kids have had different pitfalls with their devices, different chains that link them mentally to it. It's all different for, all different kids. You have to figure out what your child needs to help regulating and be the co-regulator for them, and I've had to do that in 5 different ways.
Well, lots of practice. I mean, to get to where
Lots of
you are,
practice.
right,
Mhm.
right, to be able to understand how to communicate this way.
Yeah, some big things that had to be done, some little things that had to be done with consistency for 10 years, so, like, I know all the things.
Coming back to dopamine, it's like, how with dopamine, uh, like, is there a way that we can understand, like, how if we're experiencing a high level of dopamine, or it's just like, is it, I mean, I'd imagine it takes some level of awareness, of self-awareness, right? Or and if you're, I guess if I don't know, I mean, I don't know if that's even a
Yeah,
good
you're
question, but
totally with me, and what I
yeah,
was gonna say is that, they're called the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. You're already talking
eh,
about them. The first one is self-awareness, which
right,
leads to self-regulation, which leads to social relationship awareness, which leads to social relationship management. Those are the 4 pillars. And the more you're chasing down dopamine externally, the less in, touch with what's going on with you internally. So the easiest way to think about it is the more you're caught up in this, the less the least amount of self-awareness you have, and that, I believe, is the trickiest thing, is that you can't see it. So what I teach people, I have programs that help people, not only quit porn, but figure out how to establish the lifestyle that will make it so that they never need to go back. And one of the exercises in the hardwire section, it's broken up into unwire, rewire, and hardwire. In the hardwire section is ways that you can know you're moving backwards towards needing dopamine, so that you're not counting on your own self awareness. There's an external thing you can look for in your own behaviors or your own thought processes. I call it a fault line activity, where you figure out like where the fault line is before, you have the earthquake happen.
yeah. Well, that's going to take a certain amount of self-awareness, and if you start, I can only, you start seeing porn at this day and age, and 14, 15 years old, and your friends are doing, and you're in these circles, of influence. It's like how do you, God, it's got to be really difficult to climb out,
Yeah,
over
100%. That's
time.
why
Yeah.
I'm accused of hyperbole quite often, but people don't see the brains that I've seen. Honestly, I don't know if there's another person on earth who has heard the stories that I've heard. I've heard it all in terms of porn and sexual addiction, how people are caught up in this, the depth it will take a person. So, I tell people you have to be a top 1% person more than ever, because it goes back to what you're saying. I use the adage of the fish. There's a fish swimming around in the fish bowl. Another fish comes, he's sitting on the rim and he's like, "How's the water?" And the first fish says, "What's water?" Like, everybody's in it. Our devices are so commonplace. Porn's accepted and normalized in younger, people. Hookup culture's totally accepted. So you have to be able to take a step back and go, "This water's not for me. This will never get me to where I wanna go." But that goes back to identity formation. You have to know who you are, what you stand for, and what you want out of life. So, and that fault line activity that I just told you about, it's in the hardwire section for a purpose. Because I help people unwire the need for porn, rewire their lifestyle, their brain, and their habits in the rewire section. Then, when their self awareness is a lot higher, then they can go, "Oh, yeah, like if I work 7 days straight with no breaks, that's a fault line. I didn't get any time off. If I have an argument with my partner, that could be a fault line that leads me to run for some dopamine." It's different for all people, but that's the thing you have to make sure you don't do. And if it happens, you have a plan.
Yeah. Oh, well, what about like consumption of between men and women? Like, is there a major difference between, pornography consumption between like, males and females?
Yeah, there's a lot more consumption with men, even though, we want to make this, gender neutral. I have a book out. It's called Mind Over Explicit Matter. It was geared solely towards men. And actually, I'm very grateful. It's published through HarperCollins. I'm very grateful that they made me include women, because I'm like, at first I was resistant. I'm like, I'm talking to like the 1% of women and I'm talking to the 99% of men. So why would I water this down? Like, why would I water it down? I didn't want to lose sight, but the way that I included, I was very excited because I included, like, 50 Shades and, um, Game of Thrones, where a lot of women are watching that, and rapes just completely normalized, and that actually wasn't even included in Game of Thrones in the original book. They added it to the
Oh, yeah.
television series. Like, that's the
Right.
culture we're living
Sex
in,
sells.
so but,
Right. Yeah.
back to the question is it's the vast majority is men, and then, unfortunately, women are learning to be self-objectified. So they're caught
Oh
up
my
in it, but
god.
just in a
Yeah.
different way as the consumed, and men are the consumers.
God, that self-objectified is hard to hear, for women. I mean, it's like they're just, like, feeding
Rough,
into the
and, as
problem.
the
Yeah,
mom of
really rough.
3
Yeah.
girls, I've had
Yeah.
to, honestly, I have one daughter who, if she ever hears me talk about these things, she'll kill me, but she knows the importance of this. Like, she was caught up in putting hypersexual content on Instagram, and, I told her, "I'm your frontal
Mm.
lobe, babe, like, either you need to stop doing that, or I'll take your phone away." I took her phone away, and she went off the rails, and I'm like, "You can have it back when you're back on the rails." She couldn't get herself on the rails. I canceled her phone number. She freaked out, but she now thanks me for doing that because that part is over. And then I have another daughter who wears giant baggy clothes because she doesn't wanna be hypersexualized. And
Yeah.
then I have it's kind of like a Goldilocks, right? And
Yeah.
if one bed's too hard, one bed's too soft. Then my youngest daughter, probably because we talk about it so much more openly now, she's gorgeous. She's not hypersexualized at all. She's confident. She only uses social media for her purpose and passion.
Yeah. Well,
Just
God,
right.
it's yeah, yeah, you find is that one of the
The
younger ones?
that porridge is just right.
Yeah, is that one of your younger daughters?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
She's my last.
Yeah, exactly. So
She's my
she gets
5th
all the
child.
good parenting from all the
It
mistakes,
is.
right?
It really is true, it really is true, but, I feel like
Yeah.
I worked the first 2, through that. They don't, neither of my older daughters exist in that realm anymore, but they did, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
Billie Eilish, that's what Billie Eilish says. She wore giant baggy clothes for so long because she didn't want anybody to see her body because she would be criticized or sexualized,
Right,
and
yeah.
that's
That's
a
true,
valid
especially being a public
concern,
figure like that. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree,
it's a
and it
valid concern, so I get it.
mm,
I had a daughter who was in that space, so thankfully neither they're out of those spaces.
the,
But it came through intentional parenting, and it's the
yeah.
water is supporting all of that, that's the point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what I like about having this conversation with you is not just, we're talking about science here. I mean, looking at these brain scans, you can see, when, a porn brain or a not porn brain, a brain that's been, I'd imagine, hijacked on porn for years and years and years or decades versus one that is slowly coming off like years of porn addiction. And can
Oh,
you just
yeah.
talk about
Yeah, I
like
can see it
these
all.
scans? Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, what is it? I mean, so if someone is like, we're getting into the nitty gritty of like, the approach of like letting go of porn, but just like, what does it take, typically, from what you're doing to get off of porn? Like, if someone's really like, "You know what? This is destroying my life, it's destroying my relationships. It's like, I need to change." Like, where do they begin and what's the process or how long would it take to
The easiest way to think of it, I've on my website, I updated my website. I now talk about it as a pleasure pathway reset. And, it's a double entendre. It's the pleasure pathways in your brain, the reward center in the midbrain, and the reward pathways that feed forward to the prefrontal cortex. We know that they are impacted by porn use and that dopamine hijacking. Those pathways literally need to be retrained back to the optimal brain performance pattern. And going back to what we were talking about, if a person's brain is hijacked at the age of 10, we'll just say, they've never developed the healthy, optimal brain pattern. So the people I work with, they feel better and they perform better than ever before, and their minds are blown. And then, of course, we have to also retrain through habit loops the pleasure pathways back into your life. And to me, that's the, I guess, most tragic part is that when you get hooked on all the dopamine from the screen, then your work doesn't do it for you anymore. There's not enough dopamine there. There's not 400%, which there never would have been, but your relationship doesn't do it for you, your partner, and all of these things are supported by science. People stop doing their hobbies. So We need a pleasure pathway reset in both ways, in the brain and in the habits and the lifestyle. It has to be comprehensive. It's not just about giving up porn. It's about not needing dopamine fundamentally at a neurological level. All of my work is measurable too. That's the most fun part of my work, I think, is that I can do a brain map and I can see the baseline performance pattern, but then the program that I offer is 4 months long, not an eternity. Some people think this is going to take an eternity, but I use advanced technology to teach a brain and to retrain it, and then we can see the brain coming online day by day. And within the first month there tends to be usually a very large shift from where the person was into a new pattern that doesn't need dopamine. And this is where the magic happens with the flywheel and the upward spiral.
Yeah. Well, what are some of those outcomes that you do see when people start to reclaim their brain, their time, and their relationships and their career, and actually are a person in the world instead of, I'd imagine, like, thank God I'm not, I'm so happy I'm not addicted to porn, but just waiting for the next fix, like any addiction.
Yeah. I talked to a gentleman today, and he's one of thousands of men that I've talked to with a similar story. But, basically, he has sights on when he really downward spiraled. And the reason he had the sights on it is because of the increase in anxiety, feeling depressed, sad, sexual arousal dysfunction, having ED. His partner left him because of all of those things, not able to focus on his work. So his finances are decreasing. So it can permeate every aspect of a person's life. And it's so sneaky. It happens over time, usually a longer time frame, so people don't connect the dots on, all these things that are happening in their life are connected to porn. And that's why I started speaking out about it so that people can go, oh, and then they start connecting the dots, but it permeates every aspect. So the beautiful thing is when you start upward spiraling your brain, all of those things begin to come online. Clarity, you think more clearer, you sleep better. Sleep is trashed by porn. So immediately a person starts sleeping better, makes everything better. Physical health, hit the gym now because you're not in front of your screen for endless hours. You go to the gym, you get outside in nature, you call friends, you laugh, you do your hobbies. I've had so many clients. A question on my intake is, what do you do to have fun? So many people put NA, not applicable.
Oh my
That's just
God.
not
Right.
acceptable to me. I'm like, not
Yeah.
acceptable. I ask, what do
Yeah.
you do to be creative? Nothing. I don't know. This
Yeah.
is
Oh
because
my
all the
God.
dopamine is now in the screen.
Yeah.
People stop creating, they stop having fun because there couldn't be enough dopamine there. When you
Wow.
step away from dopamine dependency, all those things come online.
Wow. I mean, that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, it's really encouraging to hear like these upward spiraling people. And one thing that I really appreciate consuming your content and just like, what we're trying to create here with Men Talk and Mindfulness is just help having people like get into life, like have real life experiences, go to a concert, you were just saying,
Mhm. Yeah.
as we took that little break, and it's like, and do
Mhm.
things like really connect with people in a meaningful way and like in real life way, and we get to learn about ourselves when we do
And
these things as well. Go for
intimacy,
it.
you
Yeah.
can have real intimacy with your partner. When your brain's looking for dopamine, your partner just looks like a weak dopamine supplier. We know this from science. Like satisfaction with how your partner looks, satisfaction with your sex life tanks because it couldn't compare to the supernormal stimuli. But then you guess what you miss out on? You miss out on all the intimacy, being seen by a person who loves you and shows up again to be with you, who wants to be with you for real, not for fake, like that's what is so cool when people go through this journey, they end up getting the relationship that they wanted. They feel free. There's no more shame. Most people feel just, this dissonance and dis incongruency, the person they want to be and the person they know they are and hiding. So, yeah, no, it's all there for the taking. It's amazing.
What usually comes along with pornography consumption is masturbation, which I have a lot of experience with. Like I think a lot of men do,
Is
you
that
know. But
personally or
I,
helping
I,
people?
I mean, well, no, come
It's
on,
both.
what do you?
It's both. No.
With myself alone, very often, So,
Thank God, yes.
uh, but what are some of the details? Well, masturbation, it's like, uh, uh, let's kind of define chronic masturbation versus like healthy masturbation. So let's go to healthy masturbation first, and then we
Sure.
can go into the
I would
chronic, please.
contend that doesn't apply. That applies to, remember how I told you 99% of men are caught in porn to some level, and there's science that shows even if you consume porn one time a month, it still impacts you. So,
Right.
you know how I contended this is affecting the vast majority.
Mm.
Thus, healthy masturbation would only apply to 1% of men.
Well, okay.
Because if you're caught up even to a small amount in going to something outside of your internal brain and nervous system to regulate yourself, you're looking for an external source for mood regulation. That's how the vast majority of people who are using masturbation are using it. So you go to it to take the edge off, release stress, release boredom, confusion of libido and actual sexual feelings becomes it becomes very skewed. So people think they feel sexual, but they're actually just feeling the call for mood regulation. So first, let's say healthy masturbation really only applies to people who don't have a porn habit and could take or leave masturbation, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I made a commitment a couple months ago, and I think I'm on my 3rd month doing this. Like, I mean, full disclosure, a little transparency, a little embarrassing as well, but I definitely am not the only man out there that's had this.
Uh,
It just like it was just too often.
mhm,
Like once a day or every other day or several times a week.
mhm.
Um, I'm a little older
And if
now,
I
and
could
yeah,
just
yeah,
offer
yeah.
you something and
I'm
offer it
listening.
to, your audience too. If
Yeah,
you make a commitment, which is what you said, you made a commitment.
I
Like
did.
if you have to make a commitment to decrease a behavior,
It's
then
a
that
problem.
means that
Mm.
behavior is worthy of consideration and questioning at least. Like,
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
have to commit to eating less salads. Let's just, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
if you had to look inside and go, I got to commit to working on this, then there's something there.
Well, yeah. Well, we had another woman on the show talking about pornography and masturbation, and she talks about masturbation like it could exist as a shame cycle. And and so for me, I was like, and I'm like, oh my God, am I living all the shame all the time? Like, trying to escape. And obviously, masturbation feels good. Uh, um, so what I've been doing the last few months is like I just once a month. And I've come to this conclusion, or I found this because I mean, I'm always in this space, like doing a lot of this work, having all these conversations, reading all sorts of different information about, um, how to be just a stronger, clear minded, calmer, more relaxed, more helpful, more like servant oriented man. And one of the things that was helpful to me is like, oh, well, I'm going to keep my potency instead of like, orgasming, through masturbation and just kind of releasing my potency. Is there any, truth to that? Like, about like kind of the lowering of your energy, lowering of testosterone or like releasing testosterone through orgasm and then having, like time in order to regain that testosterone, which is incredible for the body and the mind and how we are in the world as men.
So, first, just one quick comment is that like reducing masturbation to one time a month, I encourage people who are caught up in a compulsion, even if it's one time a week, to schedule masturbation so you're not using it as mood regulation. And I call it a masturbation meditation. Use it as a way, as an embodiment exercise to connect with yourself and to be with the sensations in your body, not dissociating to fantasy, which is generally porn informed, which most men are caught in that, not euphoric recall, not imagination. You stay in your body embodiment. And then that can actually help you tap into healthy sexuality and not stay in compulsion. And then to speak to the second point, absolutely. There's research. One thing that I am good at that other people don't spend time doing, honestly, I think, but it's something I love to do, is to look at all different research studies and connect the dots. So I'll read a research study and I'll be like, okay, well, why would that be? And then I'll look at the next one and connect the dots between research studies. When I did this in terms of what your question is in terms of testosterone, it makes perfect sense. Is that basically the more you orgasm or ejaculate, that you are depleting the system, including testosterone. Testosterone is made in the brain before in the genitals. So it goes back to your brain. I know people think everything I say, I bring it back to the brain, but it is true. That's where testosterone's made. So basically, if you're overworking the system, you're depleting it. And, one time a week, yes, that's better than a lot of the people I work with, it's daily masturbation. It's cyclical. People who are really wrapped up in it, it's 3, 4 times a day. People who have the compulsion, they will see someone at the mall and have to go masturbate to the lusting. Like, and that's not an
I
exception. That's actually not even really, I wish that was like one
Yeah.
person. That's
No,
not. That's
I've been
happening
there.
to many, many, many people who are just their brain is trained. You see someone who's, you know, you check them out at the mall, you have to go release to that. So very depleting for the system. And just one more cool thing that happened on accident is I have a client who's a bodybuilder, and he happened to have had his testosterone tested right before working with me. It's a 4-month program. He happened to have his all of his, blood work and hormones and that all checked, happened to at the 4-month mark. And he was in such stronger shape all around. And he could feel it too. He's like, this is insane. He's like, I never realized how much it was impacting me.
Yeah, and he was, like, probably whacking it for a few few days a week or more or
Oh,
something like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, especially someone like a bodybuilder, and this speak to, like, peak performers that don't wanna put substances into their body, so they won't use, illicit drugs, they won't drink a lot of alcohol. Porn is the perfect medicinal for them, but they don't understand, especially someone who, is a high-level physical performer. I work with, a decent amount of high-level athletes, and, the reason that they are with me is because they're depleting their systems in this way.
Well, I'd like to get into, like, the more of the root cause, if you will, of chronic masturbation as well as, like, pornography. Like, there's gotta be some sort of emptiness happening or, is it, is it a shame cycle that's moving through? And, like, let's get even down, like, a deeper level. I mean, it's like getting what is missing in order for this behavior to come forth.
Honestly, I think that's more of the egg than the chicken, and I'll tell you why. Because, like, in more classic porn use before high-speed internet porn, which we already talked about, before that, in more of a classical condition or addiction, older people, basically 60 and over, they would use masturbation when they were young with Playboy magazines for mood regulation. So part of the problem is this is part of the problem for everybody, but part of the problem is, you're young and something difficult happens and you learn that masturbation feels good. It helps you escape. It takes the edge off. It takes you out of your current present situation. So it becomes a tool to escape when reality gets difficult. So your parents are arguing, you go in your bedroom and masturbate. You don't feel as bad anymore that your parents are arguing. You get bullied at school, it becomes your mood regulation tool. Over time, it becomes the tool. But then now you enter into high speed internet porn with such high levels of dopamine, it just hijacks the brain. So even if there isn't this internal trauma or, really like this need for mood regulation, it's more of a habit loop that's built on very high levels of dopamine from an early age. And then, of course, there's a combined version of that also. So the newest version affects younger people more who grew up on high speed internet porn, people in their 20s, mid 20s, people in their 30s and 40s. It tends to be a combination. It's need for dopamine plus the habit loop.
Well, one thing that, coming back to that habit loop, especially developing a connection to pornography and masturbation at a young age. It's like, I have a lot of, I've trained in yoga and meditation. And one of the things with meditation that um, is helping us to wake up to are these patterns of behavior. And they call them in In Sanskrit, they call them sankara, and sankara is like an agrarian term, which means a rut. And if you just keep, and it's, that's how they used to plant seeds. They have like, they would plow the field and they would, but these sankara, if you keep running over that same rut over and over and over again, it just gets more calcified, more cemented, and it's really tough to pull out of them. And this is like, I can imagine why, especially at a young age, you're developing a habit of like whatever. It's like you had this one trigger that happened, and all this kind of feels good in some ways, and it definitely is a way to escape. Um, but then to pull yourself out of that could be very, very challenging.
And in the brain, speaking of calcification, there is a transcription factor. It's called delta phos B. And I always refer to it as kind of like cement that's being laid on the neural pathways. So the more you traverse these neural pathways, it's exactly what you just said, but from a neurological standpoint. You're traversing these pathways over and over and over and over, and then you're not traversing the other ones that would lead you to pleasure, the happiness trifecta: pleasure from dopamine, lower levels, serotonin for joy, and oxytocin for connection. If you don't do those things, then you're not using those neural pathways. And that's why I said, like, this is also sneaky because that shift kind of happens over time. There was a young person and who used to love soccer, but then he found porn and masturbation. So he's still playing soccer, but he's, masturbating to porn. And then before you know it, he hasn't played soccer. That's why I ask people the question, what do you do to be creative? What are your hobbies? And then when I meet them, I say, okay, you love hockey. When's the last time you played hockey? And this is the response 9 out of 10 times. 10 years ago. People stop doing the hobbies because the dopamine's not there. So all of this works together. Unfortunately, it's very complex. Porn addiction and sex addiction, very complex. Like, to me, when I first figured out the complexity, it was mind boggling to me. There's so many layers, and, like, you're talking about the layer of shame, just to get back to that, there is a shame layer. There is, for sure. And for some people, shame is the catalyst or the chicken. For most people in today's day and age, it's the egg, that you're caught up in this cycle, and the cycle's getting worse, and maybe you're not aware of it, or maybe you are, but you can't help it anymore. And then there's so much shame where you wanna go to your kid's, soccer game, but you pass on it because you can be at home alone, and now you're missing out on that because the need for dopamine overrides that joy you would have had in the world. That's the shame. The shame is, and then most of this is secretive. People aren't sharing this with their partners. So, you're sharing about
That's another thing.
masturbation here.
Yeah.
So, that's open, but most people aren't.
Yeah.
They're keeping all of this hidden. And I always call that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They go out in the world and they look super shiny, but that dissonance inside where they know they have a need. They have a need that needs a fix, and they've got to get their fix, and that does not compute, and they do not like that. And at a certain point, like you said, there's a wake up call where they go, and usually that wake up call is something, it's a moment that happened, not just another time of consuming porn. And it's usually ED these days, a 20-year-old with ED. And then he hears me say it's from porn and wake up. I've got ED at the age of 20 because I've been watching porn for 10 years.
Well, let's dive into that, or dive into that erectile dysfunction piece, like, um, about how it kind of happens. I mean, it is the over sexualization. It is the massive amount of dopamine that you're used to, during sexual experiences, through pornography, or even in imagination. And then you're in real life and things aren't happening, the same way that you wanted them to within a particular sexual experience. So, how does this lead and contribute to ED? And then, yeah, please, and we can keep going down that path.
Yeah, baseline arousal is shifted, like we've talked about, and the brain now needs 400% dopamine. And even before Andrew Huberman talked about that, what I have been saying is that when you have healthy baseline arousal, we'll call it a level 5. Like, you're sitting on the couch, you're just chilling, you feel calm, you feel totally alert, you're not tired, you're not stressed. Baseline arousal 5. We've already established most people are wired and tired. Wired and tired is your nervous system's at a 9 in terms of stress, and you're exhausted. You're at a 2. But unfortunately, 9 and 2 don't like add up to 7. What they add up is to, I call it the pendulum effect. You're out in the extremes, which you're very far away from 5. If you keep hitting the easy button of porn, you flood your brain with dopamine. It desensitizes the dopamine receptors in the brain. They no longer light up like they used to. So that level 5 isn't 5 anymore. It's completely dulled. It's down at 2. So then now you're really far away. And so you're no longer at a 5, which would have been healthy arousal, and your partner comes along and your brain's used to, just the healthy levels of dopamine where you go from a 5 up to an 8, or I always joke, 8 or a 9 on a good day, right? If your partner's not mad at you and your 5 kids aren't around and your dog's not barking and you don't have to be to work in 39 minutes, you go from a 5 to an 8 or a 9 so you can have a nice, engaging sexual experience with your human partner. But now your brain needs a 15 or a 20, depending upon the level of intensity of the porn you've been consuming. And we know there's tolerance building and escalation. So usually a porn habit over time goes from a level 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You'll need more and more and more. And that's the danger of high speed internet porn. It's all there. People get baited into clicking the next thing that takes them up a level of dopamine and, they're off to the races with escalation.
Wow, and as they continually do that, they're just diminishing their relation in real life, in real time relationship that they're having, and it's like
Yeah.
and that cause
And
all
partners
sorts of
aren't
problems.
stupid.
Yeah,
I always
yeah,
say
they get it.
partners aren't dumb. They can feel all of that, and that's where a lot of the shame comes from too. Then there's
Yeah,
performance
right.
anxiety on top of it,
Yeah, exactly.
which, we already said the stress isn't good for the underlying baseline arousal. So now it's time
Mm,
to be with your partner. You know you need a level 20. You're super stressed out. Your partner's like, "What is going on?"
yeah, right.
And you know it's from porn and you haven't shared that, or you have an
Oh
inkling it's from
god.
porn. You haven't shared that
Yeah.
with your partner. That's why a lot of men will go watch porn real quick before they're with their
Oh,
partner.
jeez.
But then you're just keeping your brain dependent. Or they'll
Right.
go to fantasy while with their partner. You're keeping yourself dependent on high levels of dopamine. So
Yeah,
the solution is get back to healthy baseline arousal. And then
right.
then your partner actually looks so much better to you again. It's
Yeah.
amazing, actually. And people
Wow.
have better sex lives than ever when they step away and heal their brain.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's like it's a false reality, like all this overstimulation and with dopamine and just wanting to fulfill. I'm like more of a fantasy guy. I'm not a porn guy, but it's like that's definitely gotten in a way of my relationships in the past, like, some sort of sexual experience is not, meeting, what my brain or like how I've been, kind of masturbating to sexual experiences, and in real time. And it's like, it's a real person. It's like, it's a different thing. I mean,
Well, and it's
completely.
pretty wild too,
Yeah.
like, if you think about that in terms of fantasy,
Mhm.
is that, like, if you never saw porn, what would your fantasy be, right? It would be the highest
That's
level
true.
experience that you ever had. That would be
Mm,
the bar for the highest level of dopamine, and inherently, that's the problem, is that even if people don't have a quote unquote "porn addiction," if they've been exposed to porn and now their fantasy is up there at level 17, now your
mm,
partner comes along and no partner, actually an emotionally healthy partner, likely doesn't wanna do the things that would be up at a 17, because
mm,
usually those things are violent, they're objectifying of women, and they're for the highest amount of pleasure for one partner,
mm.
not for that happiness trifecta for both people.
Wow.
Right? And so the
Yeah,
point of
yeah.
is that is the porn is the catalyst for a lot of the issues people have. And one other thing that I wanted to talk about too is that the reinforcement loops aren't just porn too also. Like porn is one reinforcement loop. So we know young people are being exposed to porn more than ever. There's scientific studies that show the younger you're exposed, the higher the frequency of consumption over the teen and adult years. So basically, the earlier you see it, the more you end up using it. Then we have the reinforcement loop of social media because these dynamics are happening there and they're becoming twisted and distorted. So now you go on social media and you're kind of playing out the dynamics of consumer and consumed. Then now that is permeating real life relationships. And so you have three reinforcement loops, not just porn itself, but porn's the catalyst.
Yeah, it's, oh god, it just gets it's like layers upon, like you said, it was complex earlier. I mean, it's just layers and layers and layers of behavior, and, and then we're continually being, brought into that behavior by just living our lives, having our phones, like, also the conversations that we're in with, people, like, that's also where we learn about sex, like, talking to your friends, like, "Oh my god, I did this, I did that," and then you get that thought in your head, it's like, "Oh, I could do that too," and it's like, um
And even just the objectification that, like, happens out in the world. There's studies that show that over 70% of boys that are 14 years old ask for nudes from girls. 70% that's happening. And same thing, a little over 70% of boys send unsolicited genital pics to girls. Like, these are the dynamics that are happening all over the place now, all, being facilitated by digital devices. That's why you have to be a top 1% person, and you have to be willing to talk to your kids about this, which, yeah, it might make you uncomfortable, but going back to those emotional intelligence pillars, you get the opportunities to increase them.
what do you mean when you say that top 1% person? Like, what would that help? Like,
Yeah.
I imagine a
So,
healthier person, yeah.
but I love this too. So, going back to the evolutionary aspect, I started saying this on accident. I'm sure it's because I had all this research in my mind. Going back to Darwin, Darwin studies show that in pair bonded creatures, which we are, humans are, that the top level females would select the top level males. And it's like this in a lot of pair bonded animals, which would leave the lower tiered men to be selected by the lower tier females. Cool, right? So, like, if you want an awesome partner and you want to create this amazing, relationship, you have to be a top level partner to be selected by, said top level women. Because men say to me all the time, like, and in comments, usually I know they're very wounded men, but they're kind of hating on me. Like, you just say that because you have a partner. I don't have a partner. I'm like, if you want a partner, you've got to be a partner that somebody wants to be with. And we know this from new studies that, masculine vitality is at risk of being destroyed by everything that we're talking about here. Less men than ever are getting into college and out. More women are graduating. For the first time ever in history, the younger generation's worse off in physical and mental health. First time ever, right? It's been getting better and better and better. And now with devices, it's getting worse. More men, because of socioeconomic reasons, are living with their parents longer. They don't move out and get their own places to live. They can't find jobs and keep them. It all goes back to their brains being in the mode of passive consumption for instant gratification. All the things I just named, they require perseverance, persistence, delayed gratification, which that's not what high levels of dopamine aren't over there. Lower levels of dopamine that lead to a little bit more when you finally use executive function skills to achieve your goals. That's what brains need to be retrained to do. So back to the question of top 1%, a top 1% person has to say, I'm not going to use porn. I'm not going to masturbate. What I'm going to do is find a partner and create an awesome sex life with that person. And, I'm not I'm not anti-sex at all. I tell people get a partner and, agree to what's fun for both of you and get it going as much as possible if you want. That's what a top 1% person is.
Yeah,
Figure out who you are. What do you care about?
there you go.
What do you want to
Yeah,
do? What do you want to add to the world? Go do it. Have
yeah,
the courage to do it, even if your mom, your cousin, and your brother think you're crazy. Do it anyway.
right. Yeah, well, I think it's, like, part of getting onto that 1% path is, like, I mean, coming back to what I said earlier, is getting control of your brain.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, and
you
it's,
do.
right, and if you're not in control of your brain, then everything else is, and you're gonna be easily manipulated, easily, just doing things that you don't necessarily, you don't know why you're doing them. You're just like everyone's doing them because you don't really have that, like, "Who am I?" And that's, I mean, that's a deep question for everyone to answer, but it's like, I mean, it's worth, asking that question, getting to those answers, and then really not just in the mind, but discovering who you are in real time with real people, real circumstances. And it's like, and that's when you begin to develop the confidence. That's when get to know, deeper who you are, because it's a nonstop process. I think that people, they just think it's a goal, or it's just like, oh, well, I'll do that one, whatever. Whereas like it could start right now.
Yeah.
What are some
And
ways that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm
and
listening.
going back to just for 1 second, going back to
Yeah.
yoga and meditation, even my work with neuroregulation, most people don't have any quiet space to even ask that question and contemplate it. There's
Right.
no quiet. There's no
Yeah.
quiet. Everybody's passively consuming. They're producing, they're at work, they're at school, then they come home and they just passively consumed. All noise. And getting quiet, that's the first step in being able to have that thought. Oh, I like pottery. Maybe I'll take a pottery class. But what happens is you're on, whatever social media and you see 27 things and you've got this distracted brain. The quiet is important to begin the journey.
Yeah, one thing, and let me know if you agree, like one thing that I teach with the men I work with and, through courses that we have here, it's like how start your day on your terms. Get up, like, have like create a little morning ritual, even if it's just 20 minutes, because then you just continually constitute a new reference point and be like, "Oh, wait, like I can control my energy. I can control my time. I can control my mind." And then it just slowly leads to builds a little bit more, and it's just like, "Oh, I mean, it's
I
important." I
talk
mean, because
about
it yeah,
onus of
mhm.
control all the time, agency. And I
Yes,
have
yes.
the most beautiful morning routine that I've had for so long that
Yeah,
I will never give up. And even like on the busiest of days, I'll preserve it. And now I do it for a pretty long time, but
yeah.
it's the way that I start my day, just
What do you
completely
got? What do you got? You
grounded.
show me yours, I'll show you mine. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
What do you
yeah.
got? What do you do? What's your morning
Yeah,
routine?
well, usually what I do is I read. I sit in quiet. My husband will sit next to me. I look at him like, I don't know what you're doing there, man, but don't talk.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
right.
I talk all day long.
All
So
right,
I
right.
will as when it's not 100 degrees out, I go outside, like outside on my back porch. I have a hummingbird feeder. There's 3 hummingbirds at it. Like it is so cool watching hummingbirds dive bomb each other while I read, and I just sit there too. Like I will literally just sit there and I will have thoughts. And then I always have a journal and sometimes I have a napkin. I'll make coffee and I'll write on the napkin when thoughts come to me and then I'll just sit again. I don't chew on that thought. I just write them down to think about it later. And before you know it, like an hour's passed. It's wonderful. And then I'll start to focus. I don't check my phone. There's days I don't even check my phone. I haven't checked email today. I will not check email until like one deliberate time in the day to see if there's anything I need to catch up on. I have no notifications on. Uh, it's just I have my calendar is in Google Calendar. I follow my appointments. I have break times that are set in so that I know when I have a break. I'm never trying to squeeze something in. That's what regulation is. And then to talk about the onus of control on the days that feel like they're getting away from me, I will just go sit on my front porch for 5 minutes. Like,
Yeah, right.
I live
Get
a busy
still.
life. I've got a lot of kids. I'm
Yeah.
like, but this is my life. I'm creating it. At any given
Mm,
time, I can shut any of it down, but I
mm.
definitely can take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize like there's a big difference between reactivity and responsibility and responsiveness. And another thing that we have a meditation course that actually we're gonna put out there in October again. Like we've done 4 different teams of meditators that come through our course over some 9-week live course, and it's been great and very helpful for mostly men that have gone through the course. And one of the ways that I get them into the conversation of how meditation can help them is getting, if we're waking up and, immediately connecting with our phone and checking our email or checking social media or maybe doing some porn like 17 million men are doing every morning. It's like, and we're always in this space of doing, or maybe get up and you work out and you go running or something like that. It's like, what's in the non-doing space?
Yeah,
Life
definitely.
is in
And
opposition. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and my husband said it the other morning. He's like, I can't wait because we're doing some cleansing and things like that. We work out almost every day, but he's starting a new thing. So he goes, I can't wait to wake up and hit the ground running. He's like, right now I'm sitting here with you, but I wish I was already out for a run. And I said, I would suggest that's not how the healthiest brain performance would be. And he's looking at me, because I'm like, easing into your day is healthy circadian rhythms. If you hit the ground running, you likely were running too hot throughout the sleep cycle. Like that's, easing in and having that quiet time. We know from meditation studies that, in those early hours of the morning, that is the time for creativity. So the way I've structured my schedule is that I have my morning routine, which I do meditate in that time frame too, is that, and that's why, well, just to speak to that for 1 second, like when you do a one breath grounding, once you experience the practice of meditation, you can feel the downshift in one breath. Like for me, that 1 minute together is I can feel myself just come all the way down because of the practice. That is the
Right.
gift that it gives you. Later on, if
Right.
something stressful happens, you take a big breath and you downshift, and now you can respond and not react. Like it's
Right.
such a gift.
Yeah.
But, that's why I said to the hubs, I'm like, I don't think it's good for you to jump out of bed and go for a sprint. Like, this time,
Yeah.
this quiet time that you're spending right now is invaluable for the rest of
Yeah.
your day.
Well, I think a lot of people, it's important to to get to know thyself. You got to slow down. You got to go on the inside. And when you go on the inside, you create a reference point of stillness and peace. And you know what it means to just to be here, just to be present without trying to fill it with whatever. And it's like, and that's where it really begins. That's how you really begin to take ownership of everything you're going to do that particular day and the rest of your life. Me, and like I get up early, like Monday through Friday. I get up like at 4:30 in the morning, and I just do a little. Either I'm reading something or I'm going to journal. I'm brewing some coffee during that time as well. Have some coffee, and then I take like an hour, to for the morning time. I do like 20. It's like a 20 20 20 is what I end up doing. So it's like 20 minutes of just like reading, slow, getting into my day, doing a little bit of journaling, have some coffee during that time. And then I'll do like 15 minutes of just some movement, like get in my body a little bit, get my body working for me, get some neurochemistry like working. And then I sit and I meditate. And then I'll sit and meditate for like 20 25 minutes and just really begin to slow things down. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I can pick up my phone. Now I can get into my rest of my day. But it's like starting on my terms, I mean, and it could be different for everybody. And it's like, and I kind of like what you're saying about the hubs, maybe don't go out and run right away. Like, what if you just like be still for a little bit? Cause that could like, I get a lot of pushback sometimes in meditation. I'd be like, we even had Jocko Willink on the show and he was pushing back on meditation. He's like, oh, well, I surf. And I was like, dude, like, yeah, but you're still in the doing space. You're still waiting for a wave. You're still, I get it, I mean, but it's like, or people like, oh, I go running. That's my meditation. I'm like, I guess, meditation
And
isn't necessarily for everyone, but like, I think it's very helpful. Yeah.
well, you know what they're talking about. They feel like it's meditation because what all like, especially running and surfing would probably do the same thing. It is something called transient hypofrontality. So basically, it like decreases functioning of the frontal lobe. So you feel better. It's very good for you, but it's not the same as actively regulating from within. And I like to do both of them. That's why I work out every day. And then it goes back to the self awareness too, where first of all, I think having a morning routine like that sets the foundation of the why of your whole day. Because if not, you can get caught up in the overstimulation of worldly values, like which are primarily pleasure that ultimately equals pain. So when you start from a more quiet space, you remember why you're going through the day. Even if it's just like, for me, it's always about showing up for people and helping them to become the best versions of themselves through neurological regulation and finding purpose and passion. And then, of course, my kids also in my family. But that requires a lot of me, a lot of doing. I do the whole rest of the day. So that's why I think it's interesting where my husband's kind of like, he looks at me like, "You should be doing more than just sitting around." But I'm like, "This is the only time I sit around because I am a high performer, and I'm not sitting around not doing anything, I'm being, and from the being comes the ability to do all the doing with the right mindset." Like, without that time to be, the rest of the doing would be misinformed. it would be built on a different foundation.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then again, it's like, and then you're working from the inside out, which is the most important thing, and you continually discover. I mean, I'm sure, like myself, it's like, you give yourself this time, you begin to take on a meditation practice, and you begin to learn something about yourself because, it's just a nonstop process. It's not like a place that you arrive. It's a continual practice of self-discovery, a continual practice of being disciplined and like realizing, because in that space, when you begin to create that space for yourself, and those impulses come up to check your phone during the day, or to do this or do that, or to masturbate, or maybe to consume more porn, right? If somebody is just starting their path, to discovering themselves and just getting into that place of stillness, now you have a place that it's just like, wait, I can make a choice. You know what I mean? Instead of being like just going down that habitual path, it's like
Definitely.
I can,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
well,
and
we
then
know
that's
impulse
where it
control and
starts,
judgment is in the frontal lobe, like those
right?
areas of the brain that control executive function, impulse control, judgment. Those are the areas that are strengthened by meditation. And I think for people who are early in that journey, you learn how busy your mind is. Like when you try to create stillness and then you've got, I always think of it as the ticker tape up in your mind. Like the ticker tape's going 1,000 miles a minute with, a million thoughts. But then you sit there and it slows down. And then after you establish the practice, you you sit into meditation and there's no thoughts.
Yeah,
It's like
right. Yeah, it's pretty
what
awesome.
is the best feeling. Like people
Right.
have no clue. And I know both of these experiences. So once you know that feeling of like just a peaceful, clear mind, and you just want to stay there for a while and you want to get there every day. And the more you get there, the more you have it and the more you have access to it when you need it, when things start to get away from you, like invaluable for living the life that you want to, one with calm,
Yeah,
clear peace.
exactly. I mean, be yourself, like,
The
event.
need for mood regulation from
Mm,
external sources goes away. When you have all that, it just literally goes away. So, like for people who are struggling with porn or other supernormal stimuli, social media, just devices, shows, long form, short form, whatever it might be, the reason is the habit loop back to it to feel better, to take the edge off of stress or boredom or fatigue. But when you move through the world regulated, you don't have those things because the circadian rhythms are back online. Then there's just no need for the self soothing or the self stimulation.
I mean, you can really become a powerful individual and become one of those 1%. Um, yeah, one of the thing that you advocate for, with porn, and let's just talk about how we can, like, let go of porn, let go of some masturbation, is for porn, you say, like, going cold turkey with a plan. So, someone that's listening and just like they're beginning to wake up that this is a problem for them, like, what's their first step on the path to becoming more of that 1%?
Is you need tools. Don't do it without tools. Uh, this is not the promo part for my book, but my book's a great resource because the reason I was so excited to get the book contract for that book was everything's in there that a person needs to plan for. So like, you have to know what your triggers are. You have to have a pivot plan for that early on. I have people make a physical pivot plan toolkit to get them through those early days. Um, Knowing where the holes in your rewire are and the things that you need to put in place, even though it might be difficult. When people work with me, we do use advanced technology. And I think that's a game changer because now we're regulating your brain every day with tech in a really powerful way, which makes it so you can use new behaviors and you can challenge your old thought systems and start having new thoughts. Like, the plan is making sure you have all the tools and the support that you need. Recognizing this is a dopamine dependency. It's like a drug addiction. It's internalized. So a heroin addict would never go, I'm going to stop, using heroin. I'm just going to do it. But when we say porn, it just seems like, oh, that just should be simple. And just to speak to something you said before about the neurological regulation at the core of porn addiction, we know this, it's proven. It's basically, I call it the silent tsunami because it happens deep in your brain at early exposure to porn and masturbation. And then that crack is getting larger and larger with, continued exposure and use. That neurological dysregulation, it's the problem, the dopamine dependency in the brain. So that's why dealing with that first and foremost helps you with emotional regulation and self regulation and relationships and setting up a schedule and all of those things.
Yeah, it's a well, you said you have a 4-month program, so it does definitely takes time, and imagine it takes a lot of commitment to do this, and a lot of help. I mean, I guess is it something that's gotta be pretty challenging because it's so deeply ingrained in the brain, I'd imagine, that it's gotta be really challenging, yeah, on your own.
It is, and if and, I just want people to know, if you have tried to quit and you have not succeeded, it's not because it can't be done. It's just because you don't have the right tools, and there's something about your formula you haven't figured out. Because I work with people who they become hopeless that they'll never get out from underneath it, and they have ED, which means they can't be with a partner, which means they go back to porn, downward spiraling it over and over. When you have the comprehensive program, so in my program too, there is a large digital masterclass that I've put together of all the pieces of this thing. And so you learn about all the pieces, and it's like a puzzle. So the pieces are different for each individual, but all the pieces are there. And so a lot of the pieces will be easy for you to put into place, but then there might be one, two, three, or four of them that are difficult for you, which would be difficult, not the same as somebody else. When you put all the pieces to the puzzle in, you move forward quickly. That's just how it goes. So you have to figure out, okay, what are your puzzle pieces? Which ones are the tricky ones for you? And start snapping these babies in place. The more you get in place, the easier it becomes. And I have one client, he's like, "When am I gonna have withdrawal symptoms?" This is a while ago. And I'm like, "You would have already. You're well out of the woods. Like, you started snapping puzzle pieces in really quickly. You never had them." And one simple, I know, like, that's all theoretical and, you need a comprehensive plan. That's absolutely true. But one thing that your listeners can take away is that you do have to do a pleasure pathway reset in your brain and in your life. So the way that I advocate that people do this is, first of all, recognize your brain is hijacked. It needs some work. It needs some work. But secondarily, if you're going to leave the digital dopamine stacking in your real life is really important. Many men go on a dopamine detox, and you do need to detox the digital dopamine, but remember, that's at 400%. So you need to try to get as much dopamine from your life. Do the hobbies that you love, like your life depends on it. Call friends, get date nights going with your partner. If you can't have healthy sexuality because of SAD or ED, at least have intimacy and connection. Like, get it going as much as possible in your real life.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's where it is, right? I mean, you keep coming back to that. It's like it's get out of the detachment of digital, right, and get into a normal like that reset's got to be really hard. What is it? Is there what does just withdrawal look like on from porn?
Yeah, withdrawal can be really, really ugly for people. It's
Uh,
like it definitely parallels drug addiction withdrawal. Increased in anxiety, insomnia, you can't focus, urges and cravings, increase in pain. Uh, Porn actually releases opioids within the brain and the system, so there's pain reduction that comes along with it. So it can lead to significant mental and physical health issues. People feel physically sick and they feel like they can't do anything and all they need is a hit of dopamine. Unless, you really get to work on getting dopamine from your life. Another thing I encourage people to do, because I'm a realist, is that, don't watch porn, but get a show that's motivational, that's slower, that you can start putting in your mind that you wanna go back and watch it, because if you go 1 degree off of porn or hypersexual content to healthier online content, a show, not like scrolling and seeking, because that's a dopamine behavior, that can be an easy way for people, like, in the evening, you start, watching a show that you like, and now you're doing that instead of watching porn. That's part of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense because you're not it's not that quick fix like every 15 seconds. So, when you're watching an episodic show, it's like it has like a beginning, middle, and end. It slowly begins to build. It requires patience. You know what I mean? It requires right presence and listening, instead of just like what's next, what's next, what's next.
Yeah, and if you're uncomfortable with it, recognize that's part of it, but, usually people get to the other side of that within a few days or a week, and that's the unwiring. That's why I break it up into unwire, rewire, and hardwire. The unwiring part can be tricky. That's the idea with the pivot plan toolkit. The pivot plan is if you have an urge or a craving, you have to pivot and change your mental and physical space. The more you do that, the better off you are, and the more dopamine you can get from the thing you go do. So if you love basketball, you have an urge to go play basketball, and if you
Yeah,
don't
have
like
have healthy
basketball, you don't.
outlets. Healthy
Outlet.
outlets, I'd imagine,
Mhm,
right, yeah, exactly, and identify those, it's like it doesn't have to be basketball or pottery like you mentioned earlier, it could be something else, but go do those things and,
mhm,
like and
mhm.
rewire your brain. Uh,
Yeah, and that's why in the end people end up with the lifestyle they've always wanted because they've established their hobbies. Like one client I worked with, the one with the hockey, when's the last time you played hockey? 10 years ago. He started playing hockey on Wednesday nights. He organized a men's league, started playing on Wednesdays. He's like, it is a game changer. Then he organized it on Saturday. So 2 times a week, he gets out with guys, plays hockey that he loves, then they go eat and hang out. Like, now he's got the lifestyle that he wanted. Instead of being chained to his computer or his phone, he's out with friends having fun. Same thing with his relationship with his kids. He started doubling down on, like, creating what he wanted from all of these things in his life.
yeah, I mean, it's very encouraging, and it's all possible, it's just you gotta take that first step, you have to have the willingness, and you have to keep showing up.
Yeah, and that's the thriving piece. Like, when you're caught in a porn addiction or a screen, and I don't even love the word addiction because that doesn't resonate for most people. That's why compulsion is a powerful word because people do feel compelled to go back. Like, if you're caught up in that, you're caught in survival mode. That's what it is. Like, we know that when you escape into the screen, the escaping is a freeze response. So you have a fight or flight response and then a freeze. That's survival mode. It's the opposite of thriving. I want every person out there to get into thrive mode and not be in survival mode. Thrive mode is you're living your best life. You're a top 1% person. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's life, but you're happy and you feel calm and peaceful.
Just a couple more questions, and thank you so much for all this. This has been just a wonderful discussion. But I
Great.
wanted to
Thank you.
get back, like, to the maladaptive, like, chronic masturbation patterns in young this is for fathers out there, like, so we have a lot of fathers that listen, and, so if they have a son that's, 12, 13, 14, becoming of age, getting that testosterone rush, and, like, all of a sudden becoming interested in themselves in a new way, how do they avoid this slippery slope of masturbation turning into something that's chronic versus something that, could be I mean,
Mhm.
it's natural. I mean, it is natural to masturbate, right? I mean, it's like,
Well,
I
I
mean,
would contend it seems natural, but maybe it's not so natural. And I'll tell you what.
yeah, let me just say I mean, I just remember like, God, I was like, it was like when I hit 14, so I could not get off my penis. Sometimes it was just like, it was just, right. It was exciting. It was fun. It felt good. Yeah.
Having sexual urges at the time when sexuality becomes a thing in your body, like that is normal or healthy, right? Like that is real. But what you do with that is that's the next step. So first to answer, okay, what do dads do when this is happening? This is going to be the most terrifying thing that I tell you. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Communication.
Right. Yeah. 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 I
Like
remember that with my
talking
dad.
about this stuff,
Yeah.
like my parents couldn't talk about anything. So
Mine
a
either.
gift of this whole part of my work has been I'm constantly talking about this stuff with my kids now and not telling them what to do, but just presenting like some of these thoughts. My husband still gives me the look when I say masturbation in front of all the kids, but I'm like, it's normalized to talk about it. Nobody freaks out anymore, where that would have been different years ago. But the idea is like, okay, sexuality is a thing. And this has changed my parenting a lot. because now I want my kids to have healthy sexuality with a partner. I think if my work didn't pivot into porn, I probably would have been more like my parents, like steering my kids away from wanting to build healthy intimacy that leads towards healthy sexuality. You know what I mean? So, but the idea with masturbation is it is mostly used for mood regulation, not sexual exploration. That's it generally is you figure it out, it feels good, it becomes the way for you to feel good. That's the danger with it. It doesn't become about sexuality at all. It becomes your escape to feel good. So back to the like, isn't it normal? It is normal because this is what's happening for most people. But I try to teach my kids when you feel mad, be mad. When you feel sad, be sad. When we have a problem, we talk about it. None of us are going to die. Conflict doesn't kill anybody. It can be healthy if it's handled in a healthy way. So, teaching your child to approach and engage instead of escape, that's the strategy. Teaching them how to build healthy sexuality towards being with a partner eventually someday, and that you're not going to die if you don't have that happen in the next 4 weeks when you're 14. you know, like it's delayed gratification, not this instant gratification of feeling good without having to work for the intimacy piece.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that works against us as men is like we had Dr. Carol Hooven on the show. She wrote the Book of T, or T, the story of T, testosterone. And it's like it's like incredible. Like dopamine is obviously one thing, but testosterone is another. And as a man, it's like I mean, it was really comforting. I got to say to hear Dr. Hooven all the research that she put into this book and she talks about women that are transitioning to men in one little piece of the book, and they get high levels of testosterone when they start to really go down this transition process. And this like soon to be or this transgender man, she was like, "Oh my god, like, I cannot believe, like, with all this testosterone in my bloodstream," I was like, "I can't believe how many boobs I was looking at, how many butts I was looking at." I mean, because it's there is a testosterone influence here for men. I mean, it's like and sometimes it's just like I see, and even as you get older, like, I'm 52 now, and it's still very real, because
Uh-huh.
I mean, I live in New York, and there's so many beautiful women here, and it's like, oh my I'm not like I'm masturbating in the bathrooms in the subway, just to, but it's like, yeah, what about that? I mean, because it definitely, I mean, you're a woman, obviously. I'm a man. Like, you have like 1/10 of the level of testosterone than we do, and also our
It's
yeah.
about
God,
channeling it and harnessing it, right?
there you go.
Like,
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about. That's what regulation is.
right.
My son just got new Crocs and with the letters on it, and they currently read, "I heart boobs forever."
There
He's
you go.
21. He's
Yeah, right.
21.
There you go. Right,
So, like, there's no shame in that. I'm like, "You
right.
gotta be kidding me right now." But, like, it is about and he works out like a fiend, not to an unhealthy level, not gym is life kind of thing. Well, he said the other day, he's like, "Mom, I enjoy my life and then I go to the gym." So, like, there's these healthy channels for increases in testosterone. And again, we've had lots of conversations about it. And obviously, I don't take myself too seriously about it either because, you can have funny crocs and no big deal. But, it's about building intimacy. He had a girlfriend and then now they broke up, but he's always putting himself in a position where he can meet new people to find a new partner. Like super cool, just a lid on it's not the difference is about healthy sexuality and hypersexuality. So, hypersexuality is you're walking down the street in New York and you can't not look at everybody. And most of the people I talk with, they're in that place. Like they they when they look at someone, they can't stop looking. That's a dopamine dependency. That's not testosterone driven. Testosterone is, yes, there's beautiful people around you and there's a mating instinct, but there also is a pair bonding instinct to go back to, you want your pair bonding instinct to trump your mating instinct. And, the research on the mating instinct is I'm sure you've probably heard of it, the research study with rats where they would copulate with a partner, but then when a new partner came in, they would have sex with that knew rat because novelty was the driver, not the pair bonding. So again, it goes back to like, what's your goal in life? You know, if you want to find true intimacy, a pair bonded relationship, which humans do usually, build a tribe and all of that, you have to channel that testosterone in that direction. And it requires regulation. That regulation makes you a top 1% person, you know?
Right, right, right. And it
And
takes
then
work to
all
get
the
there.
things you do are leading you towards your goal or away. That's the truth of it. So if you
Mm.
go on porn, it's leading you away. It is creating more hypersexuality, taking your testosterone and making it want to go in that direction. More lusting, more dopamine, you know, insatiable. So balancing healthy dopamine, like you go for dinner with your friends, food's dopamine producing, friends are dopamine producing, laughter is like that's how you get healthy dopamine fixes, which allow you to have more balanced hormones. It's when your hormones get out of balance that it becomes an issue. Healthy hormones can be channeled.
Wow. Get back to a healthy dopamine baseline is like a big part of the message that we're here and get out in your life.
And you know, just to speak to partnerships for a minute too, is that that can be a big problem because, you know, there is a testosterone piece, but you have to recognize if your brain and your mind are in a hypersexual space or a healthy sexuality space from a man's perspective. Many women, those that aren't self-objectified, and especially older women, they are hyposexual, so now you might have a partnership where the man wants to have sex a lot more often than the woman does. And again, it goes back to communication and figuring it out. So there's no need for a secret sex life or trying to tap into, you know, the feel good aspect of it.
Well, Dr. Trish, this has been such a lovely conversation. Thank you for informing our audience. Where could people find you and
Yeah, of
plug into your
course.
work,
It's my
please? Yeah.
pleasure.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm on a mission to help people, and I can be found at drtrishleigh.com, and that's kind of a hub that has pathways to everything in my space that people might need. I have a YouTube channel. It has over I think now 2,000 videos helping people on their porn addiction recovery journey. I work with partners. I have a website that you can also access from there, Sanity After Betrayal. Women, the betrayal tends to be self betrayal because they know they're in a situation where their partner is their betrayal trauma is real. So I work with partners. My goal there is to help people get strong, everybody, so that they can be in a relationship that serves them. So all paths lead, from drtrishleigh.com.
That's what we got. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. And
Thank you
everyone
for
out there
having me.
listening, yeah, no, my God, my pleasure. And please, hey, leave a review, share this with your friends out there. This is is really important work that Dr. Trish is doing, and this could, is only seems to be getting worse. And this is a way to heal, yourself and start living the life that you want, like we were talking about, and go out and get it. So, thank you
Absolutely.
once
Go get it.
again,
Let's
and
go.
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Peace, everybody.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
showing up. Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.